Okay, so if I say the name Nebuchadnezzar, just, right now, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Huh. Well, that depends on who you ask, doesn't it?
Right. For some people, it might be that giant 15-liter bottle of champagne, the one they spray everywhere after a championship.
Then Nebuchadnezzar, yeah. Or if you're a sci-fi nerd, maybe it's the ship from The Matrix.
Exactly. But I think for most of us, especially if you grew up with any kind of biblical stories, he is the villain. He's the ultimate bad guy.
Oh, absolutely. He's the tyrant, the guy with the fiery furnace, the destroyer of nations.
Yeah.
He is. He's the monster who comes in and smashes everything wholly.
It's a heavy reputation. I mean, to carry that for, what, 2,500 years?
It is. But that's what makes this so fascinating. Because if you set aside what his enemies wrote about him, and you look at what he wrote and his own records.
It's his own diary, basically.
Yeah, effectively. You find a totally different person. You don't see a warmonger. You see this incredibly pious, almost obsessive architect, a builder, a man who wanted to be remembered for his temples and his walls, not his wars. He called himself the king of the universe. But in his own inscriptions, he comes across more as the provider-in-chief.
You had to have a serious ego to pull off King of the Universe. I mean, that's not a title you just throw around lightly.
No, you really don't. But, the historical consensus is if anyone came close to earning it at that time, it was probably him.
So this is a man who ruled for 43 years, right? The longest reigning king of his entire dynasty.
The longest. And in that time, he completely redrew the map of the ancient Near East and built things that, we are still excavating and marveling at today. The Ishtar Gate alone is a legacy.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to take all these sources, the Babylonian Chronicles, the biblical books of Jeremiah and Daniel, the cuneiform inscriptions, and try to, reconcile these two guys.
The destroyer and the provider.
Yeah. We want to find the real Nebuchadnezzar II. And to do that, we first have to set the stage. We're talking about what, around 605 BC? What's going on in the world?
It is, it's a massive power vacuum. For centuries, the Assyrian Empire was the bully on the playground. They were the superpower.
That's unstoppable.
They seemed that way. They ran everything from modern Iraq to Egypt. They were notoriously brutal, incredibly efficient, and then suddenly they weren't. By the time Nebuchadnezzar is a young man, Assyria is just imploding.
Like the fall of the Roman Empire, but on fast forward.
Much faster. And whenever a superpower collapses, it's chaos. Everyone makes a grab for a piece of the pie.
So who are the major players jumping in?
You've got the Medes rising in the east, out of Iran. You've got Egypt pushing up from the south, trying to reclaim territory in the Levant. And then you've got Babylon sitting right in the middle, trying to claw its way back to being the top dog.
It's a free-for-all.
A total free-for-all. A cage match for control of the known world. And Nebuchadnezzar is about to step into the ring.
Okay, but before he's the king of the universe, let's start with the man himself. And that has to begin with his name. Because Nebuchadnezzar is a mouthful. And apparently, not even the right mouthful.
Not quite, no. That's the version we get through Hebrew and then English. If we were speaking his native language, Akkadian, we'd call him Nabu-Kuduri.
Nabu-Kuduru. Okay, break that down for us. These names are always little sentences, right?
They are. The first part, Nabu, is the god Nabu. He was a huge deal in Babylon. The god of wisdom, writing, literacy.
Son of Marduk, the main god of the city.
The very same. So right away, you're invoking divine wisdom. The last part, U, is a command. It means protect or watch over.
So Nabu, protect something. And that middle part, Kuduri, that's where it gets a little tricky from what I read.
That's where the debate is. The standard translation, the one you'll see most often, is Nabu, watch over my heir.
My firstborn son.
Right. Kuduru is interpreted as heir, and that makes total sense for a king, doesn't it? The whole game is about succession, about your line continuing. You're basically naming your son as a prayer for a grandson.
But there's another meaning for Kuduru, a more physical one.
There is. A Kuduru was also a boundary stone, a physical marker, like a deed, that showed where your land ended. So you could translate the name as Nabu, protect my boundary.
Which, for a guy who spent his life fighting on his borders, seems incredibly appropriate.
It's very tempting to see it that way, and some older scholarship does. But most modern historians stick with heir, just because royal names are almost always about the dynasty. But there is a third theory.
Ah, okay.
And this one is Well, it's a lot less respectful.
This has to be the mule theory. I saw this in the notes and I had to read it twice. Is this a serious academic theory?
It is. It's speculative, of course, but it was proposed by a respected Assyriologist, Adrianus van Selms. He noticed something in the way the name is spelled in the Bible.
Right. Sometimes it has an N, sometimes an R. Nebuchadnezzar versus Nebuchadrezzar.
Exactly. And Nebuchadrezzar with the R is actually closer to the original Akkadian. But Van Selms proposed that the N version, the one we all know, might have started as a joke. A rude pun circulated by his enemies. Yeah. If you just tweak the Akkadian pronunciation slightly to Nabu-Kudanu-Ur, the meaning changes completely. It goes from Nabu, protect my heir, to Nabu, protect the mule.
The mule, as in the animal.
The beast of burden, yeah.
So you're the most powerful man on earth, and your enemies are running around calling you a donkey behind your back.
Basically, yeah. Van Selms argued this nickname probably started during his early years, which were really shaky. We think of him as this unstoppable force, but he had a rough start. Calling him a mule would have been a sharp bit of political propaganda. It paints him as stubborn, maybe a bit oafish, definitely not a legitimate king.
It makes it feel so much more real. These weren't just epic figures. They were politicians slinging mud at each other.
Absolutely. And that feeling of maybe not being a legitimate king might have come from his family background. He wasn't exactly from a long line of royals.
Let's talk about his dad, Nabopolassar.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of the founder of this whole empire, right?
He is. He's the revolutionary general who led the uprising that kicked the Assyrians out of Babylon for good. But here's the key thing. Nabopolassar never once claimed to be royalty.
That's weird. Don't new kings usually invent a glorious family tree that goes back to the dawn of time?
Almost always. But Nabopolassar, in his own inscriptions, calls himself a son of a nobody. Now that could just be a bit of false modesty, a literary trope, but it might be literally true.
So where did he come from?
Well, there's this fascinating bit of historical detective work that suggests his family were prominent politicians, but from the city of Uruk, south of Babylon.
And this ties back to that word kudru, doesn't it?
It does. We have Assyrian intelligence reports, basically, that talk about this really troublesome governor of Uruk, whose name was Kuduru. This Kuduru had sons who were violent anti-Assyrian rebels.
So the Assyrians hated this family.
Oh, they despised them. So much so that after Kuduru died, the Assyrians went to Uruk, dug up his corpse, and dragged it through the streets as a warning.
Wow. That's personal.
It's as personal as it gets. It's a threat against you in this life and the next. The theory is that Nabopolassar was a son or grandson of this very same Kuduru.
So Nebuchadnezzar, or Nabukadnezzar, was named to honor his desecrated grandfather.
Precisely. The name isn't just a generic prayer. It's a statement. It's a vow of vengeance. It's a middle finger to the entire Assyrian establishment.
That explains so much. It wasn't just about territory. It was a blood feud.
A multi-generational blood feud.
So Nebuchadnezzar grows up in this revolutionary house, the son of the great liberator. You'd think he'd be in the army from day one, but that's not where his career starts.
No, it's a bit of a surprise. The records show his first major job was high priest of the Iana temple in Uruk.
A priest, not a soldier.
A priest, and based on the timeline, he could have been as young as 15 or 16.
A teenager running one of the most important religious centers in Mesopotamia. That's a lot of responsibility.
It was a classic political move. His father needed to lock down their home turf of Uruk, so he puts his son in charge of the biggest institution in the city. But think about what that means for Nebuchadnezzar's development.
He wasn't just a meathead general.
Not at all. He's literate, he's educated, he understands theology, temple economics, ritual. He knows how the state religion works from the inside out. That duality, the priest who becomes a general, is the key to his whole personality. He's a man who can lead an army but also debate the finer points of an omen.
But he doesn't stay a priest forever. The war is still going on. And this takes us to 605 BC and the Battle of Carchemish.
This is it. This is the moment everything changes. If you want to understand Nebuchadnezzar's entire reign, it starts here.
So set the board for us. Who's on what side?
Okay, so the Assyrian Empire is basically a zombie at this point. It's dead, but the army is still kind of shuffling around in northern Syria, and they've called for backup from Egypt.
Egypt, who hated Assyria, why would they help?
Because they hate the idea of a strong Babylon even more. It's classic balance of power politics. They'd rather prop up a weak Assyrian corpse as a buffer state than face a new, vigorous Babylonian empire on their doorstep.
Makes sense.
So Pharaoh II marches this huge Egyptian army north to Carchemish, which is this strategic city on the Euphrates River.
And Nabopolassar is too old and sick to lead the Babylonian army himself.
Right, so he stays home and gives sole command to the crown prince. To Nebuchadnezzar, this is his final exam. It's his first time in sole command, and he's up against the might of Egypt.
And how does our priest-turned-prince do?
He absolutely crushes them. I mean, it's a total annihilation. He crosses the river and hits the Egyptian line so hard it just disintegrates.
The Babylonian Chronicle is our source for this, right? It's pretty blunt.
It's chillingly blunt. It just says, he inflicted a defeat upon them and finished them off completely.
Finish them off.
And then it gives this detail, not a single Egyptian escaped.
That's not just winning a battle, that's a massacre. He must have pursued them.
He hunted them down, he chased the fleeing remnants south and wiped them out. It was a message to the entire world. Egypt is broken, Babylon is in charge now.
But right at this peak, this absolute moment of triumph, everything changes.
Yes. While he's still in Syria, probably planning his next move, a messenger arrives with news from home. His father, the king, is dead.
And in any monarchy, that is the most dangerous moment.
It is the moment of maximum danger. He's hundreds of miles away with the army, and back in Babylon, he has a brother.
The brother with that really strange title.
Nebuchadnezzar. His official title was equal brother.
Which just sounds like you're asking for a civil war. I'm the king, but, he's my equal.
It's so ambiguous and so dangerous. And Nebuchadnezzar knows that if he hesitates, if he takes the long road home, he might find the gates of Babylon locked and his equal brother sitting on the throne.
So he has to rush.
He rushes. He abandons the campaign, takes a small escort, and makes a mad dash directly across the desert.
The ancient world's most frantic commute.
It really was. It was a dangerous, grueling trip. But he makes it back to Babylon in about 2 weeks. He secures the throne, the equal brother conveniently vanishes from the historical record.
Right, I can imagine.
And he's crowned king. The transition is swift and stable because who's going to argue with the guy who just destroyed the Egyptian army?
So he's king, he's a war hero. It seems like everything should be smooth from here on out. But it isn't, is it? This is where we get what some historians call the paper tiger period.
Exactly. The high from Carchemish wears off pretty quickly, and the reality of running an empire sets in.
Paper tiger, meaning he looks threatening, but the smaller kingdoms think he might be all roar and no bite.
That's the idea. So in 604 BC, the year after he becomes king, he marches down into the Levant to collect tribute. To make a point, he sacks the city of Ascalon. And we've found the evidence for this, by the way. Archaeology shows a massive destruction layer right at this time.
So he's trying to look tough.
He is, but then he gets a little too confident. In 601 BC, he decides to invade Egypt itself. He wants to finish what he started.
Which is never a good idea. Invading Egypt is famously difficult.
It's a logistical nightmare. And Pharaoh Necho had spent the last 4 years rebuilding his army. He was waiting for him.
So how did it go?
It was a disaster, a bloodbath for both sides. The Babylonian Chronicle, which usually brags about victories, is very honest here. It admits both armies suffered huge casualties. Nebuchadnezzar was forced to retreat. He failed.
And in that world, news of a failure like that travels fast.
It travels very fast. And suddenly, all those little vassal kings in the Levant start thinking, maybe this guy isn't invincible after all.
And they stop paying their taxes.
They stop paying tribute. The king of Judah, a guy named Jehoiakim, openly rebels. He makes a bet that Egypt is the winning horse now. This is probably when the mule nickname really took off.
Because he looks stubborn and foolish.
Exactly. He's struggling. And it's not just out in the provinces. We have records from 594 BC of a rebellion inside Babylon itself, right in the heart of the empire. We have a tablet describing Nebuchadnezzar personally presiding over the trial of a traitor, an oathbreaker, likely a high-ranking official. This wasn't some distant problem. It was a knight pointed at his own back in his own palace.
That context is so important. It means his later brutality wasn't just random cruelty. It was driven by paranoia, by this constant fear that the whole thing was about to fall apart.
And that paranoia leads directly to the event he's most infamous for, the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because from the biblical perspective, this is the end of the world. But from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, what is it?
It's a pest control problem on his most strategic border. You have to look at the map. Judah is a small kingdom, but it's sitting right on the main highway between Mesopotamia and Egypt.
It's the buffer zone.
It's the buffer zone, and you can't have your buffer zone cozying up to your main rival. After that failed invasion of Egypt, King Jehoiakim of Judah switches allegiances. That's a threat Nebuchadnezzar cannot ignore.
So he marches. This is the first siege in 597 BC.
The first one, yes. It's important to remember there were two. And in this first one, he's actually pretty restrained.
What happens?
Well, Jehoiakim dies during the siege, and his young son, Jeconiah, surrenders the city. Nebuchadnezzar accepts the surrender. He takes the temple treasury to pay for the campaign. He deports about 10,000 of the top citizens, and he takes the young king Jeconiah back to Babylon as a hostage.
And he puts a new king on the throne, a puppet.
A puppet king named Zedekiah. And about Jeconiah, the hostage king, this is where archaeology gives us this incredible little detail.
The ration tablets.
The ration tablets. In the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, archaeologists found these administrative lists for food distribution oil, barley, dates. And on one of them, it lists rations for Yakanu, king of the land of Yehuda.
Jeconiah, he was living in the palace.
He wasn't in a dungeon. He was a well-fed, high-status political prisoner. It shows Nebuchadnezzar was trying a political solution. He thought he had solved the problem.
But the puppet king Zedekiah had other ideas.
Well, Zedekiah was in an impossible position. He had a pro-Babylon faction led by the prophet Jeremiah telling him to submit. And he had a pro-Egypt nationalist faction screaming for rebellion.
And he eventually listened to the wrong people.
He did. About 10 years later, he rebels. He gambles that Egypt will come save him.
And this time, Nebuchadnezzar is out of patience.
Completely. This is 587 BC. The paper tiger is gone. He comes back with his entire army. And this time, the goal isn't just submission, it's erasure.
The scorched earth policy.
He besieges the city again, this time for about 18 months. Finally, the walls are breached, and his orders are to destroy everything.
Everything.
They burn the Temple of Solomon to the ground, they tear down the city walls, they burn the palaces, and then they begin the Great Exile, deporting almost everyone of any importance, leaving only the poorest farmers behind. He wanted to turn Judah into a smoldering wasteland, a dead zone, so Egypt couldn't use it as a base.
And the fate of Zedekiah, the king who betrayed him, is just pure horror.
It is a masterclass in calculated terror. Zedekiah is captured trying to flee. He's dragged before Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar forces him to watch as his own sons are executed.
The end of his line.
The very last thing he will ever see. Because immediately after his sons are killed, Nebuchadnezzar has Zedekiah's eyes put out.
So he spends the rest of his life in darkness with that final image burned into his mind.
It's a message to every other king in the empire. This is the price of disloyalty. It's monstrous, but from a cold political standpoint, it worked.
But Judah wasn't the only headache he had in that region, was it? There was also Tyre.
Tyre, the siege that went on forever. Tyre was this great Phoenician city-state on the coast of modern Lebanon.
And the sources say he besieged it for 13 years. How is that even possible?
Because Tyre was a logistical nightmare. The main city was on an island just under a kilometer offshore. Nebuchadnezzar has this unstoppable land army, but he doesn't have a navy.
So he's stuck on the beach just staring at them.
Pretty much. He captures and destroys the part of the city on the mainland, but the population just retreats to their island fortress. And since they're Phoenicians, the best sailors in the world, they just keep resupplying by sea.
For 13 years. That shows incredible stubbornness on his part.
Incredible. It became a stalemate. He refused to give up. Eventually, they reach a compromise. Tyre agrees to formally accept his authority, and he agrees to leave their island alone. It's not the total victory he wanted, but it shows he would not tolerate defiance.
Okay, so we've established the warrior, the destroyer. But if we pivot and look at the inscriptions from Babylon itself, we get a totally different man.
A completely different man. If you read the texts he commissioned, the things he wanted to be remembered for, war is barely a footnote.
He doesn't brag about Jerusalem.
Never. He doesn't mention Carchemish. He doesn't talk about blinding Zedekiah. He talks about one thing and one thing only. Building.
He's the provider.
He's the provider.
Yeah.
His passion was turning Babylon into the greatest city the world had ever seen, and he succeeded.
Let's talk about what that city would have looked like. It wasn't just big, it was colorful.
It was dazzling. The absolute jewel was the Ishtar Gate. If you've ever seen the reconstruction in Berlin, it just takes your breath away.
We're talking about those bright blue glazed bricks.
A deep, rich lapis lazuli blue. It's a technology that essentially turns mud brick into colored glass. And all over the gate are these raised reliefs of animals in gold and yellow brick.
Dragons and bulls.
Hundreds of them, 575 to be exact. The dragons were symbols of Marduk, the bull symbols of the storm god Adad.
And that gate led onto the processional way.
A wide paved avenue flanked by high walls, also covered in blue glazed bricks. But these walls were lined with rows of lions, the symbol of the goddess Ishtar.
Can you just imagine being a visitor, maybe from a little mud brick village somewhere, walking into that city for the first time?
It would have been a sensory overload. You're walking through this canyon of shimmering blue and gold. The lions seem to be marching right alongside you. It's pure propaganda in architectural form. It screams power, wealth, and divine favor.
But it wasn't just for show. He built practical things, too.
Oh, massive infrastructure projects. He built the so-called median wall to the north of the city as a major defensive line. He dug the Royal Canal, which linked the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and revolutionized the region's agriculture. He was securing the economic and military heart of the empire.
Okay, we have to talk about the one project he's most famous for. Even more than the Ishtar Gate. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
The story's just so romantic.
It's the ultimate grand romantic gesture, isn't it? He builds it for his wife, Amytis, who was a princess from Media in the mountains of Iran, and she's homesick for the green hills of her homeland.
So he says, fine, I'll build you a mountain right here in the middle of the desert.
Here you go, dear. An artificial mountain of terraced gardens with exotic trees and flowers and some amazing hydraulic system pumping water all the way to the top. It's an incredible story. But here's the really frustrating part. We've never found it.
Nothing. No archaeological evidence at all.
0. We've found his palaces, the walls, the gates. We know the city's layout. There is no sign of anything that could be the Hanging Gardens. And even more telling, Nebuchadnezzar, who wrote down every single brick he ever laid, never mentions it. Not once.
So it's just a myth.
Well, the leading theory now is that it's a case of mistaken identity. The Greek writers who made the list of wonders centuries later probably got confused.
Confused how?
There was a great Mesopotamian king who built an incredible garden with screw pumps and aqueducts. But it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon.
Who was it?
It was the Assyrian king, Sennacherib, and he built it in his capital city, Nineveh. We even have palace reliefs from Nineveh that show gardens that look exactly like the descriptions of the Hanging Gardens.
So the story just got attached to the more famous city and the more famous king over time.
That seems to be what happened. The legend migrated south to Babylon, so Nebuchadnezzar gets the credit, but it's very unlikely he actually built it.
That's kind of a shame. I like the romantic story. But I guess the Ishtar Gate is a pretty good consolation prize for his legacy.
Not a bad trade-off, no.
Speaking of his legacy, we have to address the other story he's famous for. Not just the destroyer, but the Mad King.
Right. The Book of Daniel, chapter 4.
The story is unforgettable. He's on his palace roof, bragging about the great Babylon he's built, and a voice from heaven strikes him down. He loses his sanity for 7 years and lives like an animal in the wild.
His hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. It's a powerful story, a theological lesson about the sin of pride.
But did it actually happen?
Historically speaking, almost certainly not. Not to Nebuchadnezzar, anyway.
So what's the explanation?
This is another case of mistaken identity. The story almost certainly originated with a different Babylonian king, Nabonidus.
Nabonidus. He was the last king of the empire, right?
He was, and he was a very strange, eccentric ruler, and he really did abandon Babylon. He went into a self-imposed exile for 10 years in the desert oasis of Taima in Arabia.
He just left.
He just left his son in charge and went off to the desert to worship the moon god Sin, which made the powerful priests of Marduk in Babylon absolutely furious. So from their perspective, he was a mad king who abandoned his duties and went to live in the wilderness.
And over the decades, as the story was retold, the name of the more famous, more notorious king got swapped in.
Exactly. If you're telling a cautionary tale about a Babylonian king being humbled by God, it has more punch if it's the guy who destroyed the temple. So the madness of Nabonidus gets rebranded as the madness of Nebuchadnezzar.
So in reality, Nebuchadnezzar ruled competently right up to the end.
All the evidence suggests he did. He died of old age in 562 BC after a 43-year reign. He died in his bed, not eating grass in a field.
But his empire didn't last long without him.
It collapses with shocking speed. It really shows how much of the empire's stability was just his own personal strength and force of will.
So who came after him?
His son, Amil-Marduk. He only lasts for 2 years.
What happened to him?
He's murdered by his own brother-in-law, who then takes the throne.
A palace coup?
A coup. And then that king dies, and his son is murdered a few months later. It's just a spiral of assassinations and instability. The whole thing falls apart.
And then the Persians arrive.
And just 23 years after Nebuchadnezzar's death, Cyrus the Great marches into Babylon and takes the city without a fight. The Neo-Babylonian Empire is over.
It's incredible. It was like a supernova. It burned so brightly under this one man, and then it was just gone.
Which really brings us back to that central question of his legacy, doesn't it? It all depends on where you're standing.
Right. If you're a Jewish exile, he's the monster. He's the hammer of God, as the prophet Jeremiah calls him. But he's still a destroyer.
But if you're a merchant in Babylon, enjoying the peace and prosperity, walking down that beautiful processional way, he is the greatest king that ever lived, the pious provider who made the gods proud.
I think that's what makes him so compelling. He's not a one-dimensional villain. He's this complex, brilliant, brutal, and probably deeply insecure man trying to hold his world together.
He was. He used terror and he used architecture as two sides of the same coin to project power. And for 43 years, it worked.
So a final thought for everyone listening. We talked about the Ishtar Gate. It's one of the few things from this story that you can go and see with your own eyes today. So if you get a chance, just Google a picture of it.
Really look at it. Look at those blue bricks and the golden dragons. And just think that every one of those bricks was made on the orders of a man who's probably called a mule behind his back, who blinded a king with his own hands, and who more than anything else wanted to be remembered as a humble servant of his gods.
So which one was he, the builder or the destroyer?
I think the only possible answer is both.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.